Well, good morning, everybody. We're just waiting for people to come through from the waiting room. But a very warm welcome to you on this Tuesday morning. Thanks very much for joining us again. It's great to see everybody. I think we've just got a couple more people sort of still filtering through. Just wait another few moments. And I think as we're just waiting for the last couple of people to join us this morning, as usual, if you would like to tell us where you're watching from, that would be really interesting to know. We have people from all over the country and sometimes abroad, which is fantastic to see. So if people would let us know. Oh, I've got somebody from Venice. Amazing. Welcome. Got people from the north. Got Newcastle, North Shields, Great Shropshire. It's always really interesting to know where people are from. I think it just shows that these online talks are really good to keep doing, even though we're starting to get a bit more back to normal. Oh, somebody from Italy as well. Great. Welcome, everybody. Well, I think we've probably got most people with us now. So I think it's nearly 11. So I think we'll make a start. So this morning's talk, I wasn't sure about the title to start with, calling it a sad story. I've tried to make it uplifting at the end though, so so do bear with me. What I'll do is I'll turn my video off so you don't have to watch me. So this is, again, it's always difficult in a way to choose the highlight of the month because nearly everything in the collection is my highlight. It's everything is so varied, but I thought we'd link in a little bit with last month's talk on St. Radagunda, our only design for stained glass, because this talk here is the actual stained glass from the collection, the only example of stained glass we have at the Society. So it's another very special part of the collection for me. So we'll just make a start with our first slide. So here it is. So we're going to explore this morning the story behind the Society's only example of stained glass, and actually one of the very earliest created by Philip Webb and Morris. So we'll look at the sad story behind the glass, which was a major feature within Sandroyd, Webb's second architectural commission after Red House. Here we have a plan, one of Webb's plans for Sandroyd. It's dated 1860 and it's from the V&A print room. There are also other contract drawings from the early 1860s for Sandroyd at the V&A. And after looking at this striking studio home and the artist who commissioned it, we'll then turn to the unhappy circumstances which led to the vandalism of these beautiful examples of glass, and discover how the Society became involved in rescuing these early arts and crafts treasures, which are now on permanent display at the Society's museum at Kelmscott House. And I imagine those of you that have visited us at Kelmscott House in Hammersmith may well remember these stained glass panels on the ground floor in the drawing rooms, in the basement drawing library. So John Rodham Spencer Stanhope, originally of Cannon Hall near Barnsley, commissioned Sandroyd, where our glasses was from. He became the pupil of the painter George Frederick Watts, for whom Webb would also later design a studio house. And it was through Watts that Stanhope entered the pre-Raphaelite artistic circle at Little Holland House, where he met Dante Gabriel Rossetti and Edward Burne-Jones. Stanhope was a friend of Morris, and he helped paint the ill-fated murals for the Oxford Union building, which we heard about in the very first talk we did back in January. When Stanhope married in 1859, he bought a large site on a wooded hillside at Fairmile near Cobham in Surrey, where he hoped the country air would alleviate his chronic asthma. And so it was natural, really, that Stanhope would commission his new home from his friend Philip Webb, because they were already friends. They had much in common, including a love of wildlife and ancient buildings. And here we have a photograph of Sandroyd in very recent times, which is going to be quite a contrast to some of the photographs I'm going to show shortly, showing it how it was when the society was involved in saving the stained glass. So the architect of Sandroyd, Philip Webb, began his career as an assistant for the Gothic Revival architect George Edmund Street, before moving to London in 1858 to found his own firm. Webb met Morris whilst working for Street in Oxford, and the two men became lifelong friends. Webb became a prominent architect, being referred to as the father of arts and crafts architecture. Webb is best known for designing Morris's Red House in Bexley Heath in Kent, as well as many other prominent houses. Probably the most best known to us is another arts and crafts property open to the public, Standon in Sussex. Webb was one of the founding members of Morris, Marshall, Faulkner and Company, and he made a significant contribution to the firm, designing tiles, stained glass, as we'll hear about, tableware and furniture. And in 1877, he and Morris founded the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings to promote the preservation of the building's entire history and save buildings from being unnecessarily restored or destroyed completely. And today, the organisation still upholds these values and promotes the conservation of historic buildings. By the late 1850s, studio houses were becoming increasingly popular, with Red House making Webb a popular choice for new architectural commissions. And just as at Red House, Webb would become known for certain characteristics such as simplicity of style, practicality, prominent roofs and chimneys, and well-lit rooms in a variety of sizes and shapes, as we'll have at Sandroyd. Built in 1860, Sandroyd is an important and early arts and crafts property. It was commissioned, developed, and actually partly built before Red House was finished. So I'm going to show some photographs from the Society's collection which show Sandroyd during its period of neglect at the time the Society was involved in saving the stained glass. So apologies for some of the photographs, they're not the best quality. We don't have digital examples, these are actual hard copies which I've had to photograph. So just as he would urge future arts and crafts architects to do, Webb exploited the possibilities of the site, utilising the hillside to partly enclose the entrance court while putting the stables on the flatter ground so not to obstruct the view. And like Red House, it was built of red bricks, roofed in red clay tiles, and it also has other similar details, including pointed exposed brick arches and a weather vane. Sheila Kirk, the expert on Webb's architectural works, believed that Sandroyd was actually an improvement in some respects on that of Red House, and that Webb provided a sitting area with direct lighting and sheltered from drafts by a closed porch. The ground floor of Sandroyd had an unusually large living room, while the domestic offices and nursery were on the first floor. The second floor housed two well-lit studios, a waiting room, WC, and a model's dressing room. Recalling the house when it was first built, Edward Burne-Jones, friend of Stanhope and Webb, called Sandroyd just a bit over severe. although just as at Red House, climbing plants softened its harsh red newness. Webb went on to add domestic offices in 1864 and carried out further alterations in the 1870s. Elizabeth Stanhope left the decoration and furnishing to her husband. Although I haven't found records of the interiors, I can assume that as Stanhope's other homes were filled with paintings, hangings, embroideries, and pre-Raphaelite furniture, that it's likely that Sandroyd also had a similarly rich and colourful interior, again similar to that at Red House. Webb designed some of the interior features, such as the fireplaces and the stained glass panels that are the subject of our talk today. I also believe that he may have designed this Gothic style dresser, which has similarities to the Gothic style furniture at Red House, but that's my own conjecture. I don't have any proof of that. Unfortunately, Stanhope's severe asthma caused him to spend most of his time in Italy from 1865. And in 1880, he moved permanently to his villa near Florence. Sandroyd was therefore sold, becoming a boys' school, and then later, under the name of Benfleet Hall, it became an independent girls' school in the 1930s. And you can see here in the entranceway a tree and actually branches growing through the roof. It was in such a sad state. And in the 1950s, a fire led to a period of neglect and dereliction, which just highlights in this photograph that neglect. It was just such a sad state. Sandroyd was saved when it was Grade 2 star listed in 1963 and was subsequently divided into flats. And externally, it's now almost as Webb left it, as we saw in that very first photograph, but unfortunately without several of his interior fittings, including the stained glass. And this is where the story of our stained glass begins. So here we have the painted and stained glass quarries that I showed you earlier, which are now at the Society. As you can see, they formed part of a screen above the staircase, the main staircase, which had a simple boarded oak balustrade. Above is the bracketed oak arch with the screen of stained glass panels above. This photograph, like the rest, was taken in 1962. The screen consists of 36 quarries, 160 by 140 millimeters, with delightful portrayals of domestic birds, alternating with floral motifs and heraldry. And here we have the close-up of the glass that we have on display at Kelmscott House. The motifs were mostly designed by Webb, with some of the floral patterns we believe to be by Morris, or perhaps a collaboration between the two friends. In fact, Letherby, Webb's biographer, was to remark, "The early work of Webb and Morris was so interwoven that we cannot tell in some instances where the work of one man began and the work of another finished." Webb was a very skilled draftsman, adept at drawing animals, particularly birds, which adorn tiles, stained glass as we have here, and textiles produced by Morris and Company. He would also just a couple of years later, go on to draw the birds in Morris's early wallpaper designs, such as Trellis, because Morris felt him to be the superior artist when it came to depicting birds. The quarries, the stained glass quarries, squares, are very important in that they're amongst the first made by Webb and Morris. They were previously thought to be the earliest actually made by the firm of Morris, Marshall, Faulkner and Company, but more recent research has led us to think that they now probably were manufactured by Powell's of Whitefriars, as we now think they predate the production of stained glass by the Morris firm. Powell's were a long-established and leading firm of stained glass makers. And Webb also designed table glass for manufacture by Powell's to be retailed by Morris and Company. 3 of the quarries are of Spencer Stanhope's heraldic shield, which we'll see shortly, and 2 are of an oak tree, which we can see on the bottom left, with the inscription Edeo Erege, for God and King, that's the Stanhope part of the name, and Dieu defend le droit, God defend the right, for the Spencer part of the surname. And with the initials RSS, bottom left, for Rodham Spencer Stanhope, and 1861, as we can see here. And the remaining show 3 floral patterns and a magpie in the centre right, and a hen and chick on the bottom right. All of the quarries have a border of parallel lines on 2 sides, and the motifs are believed to be based on 15th century types, although more research needs to be undertaken on their exact inspiration. There are other similar designs and variations of our quarries at Red House. Again, Red House designed by Philip Webb, and these stained glass designs by Webb, but they're of a slightly different size. And if any of you have visited Red House, you might remember them in the long gallery that leads to the back porch of the house. This is a detail of a cock crowing, and here we have a goose from Red House. And just looking at other examples that are very similar to ours, these 9 quarries are from the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. Like the Society's examples, these are also hand painted in brown and yellow and leaded together to form a pane, and they've now been mounted in a wooden frame for display, just as ours have. These quarries are also of clear glass, each decorated with a bird and a floral pattern, but these floral patterns differ from the Society's, as do some of the birds, but we both have the magpie in the centre there. At the top, we've got a flying duck, and at the bottom right, the same design in reverse. And at the top right and bottom left is a heron with raised wings. And in the centre, we've got the magpie with its splayed legs and its raised tail. And alternating with the birds, we've got the glass quarries with a daisy-like plant. They've got 3 flowers with 4 crescent-shaped buds, and these are believed to be by Morris. And each of these quarries is 16.5 centimetres square. According to the previous owner, before they were donated to the Fitzwilliam, these quarries were removed from the windows of the nursery in Red House. And then moving on to some similar examples, this panel is from the V&A and is made up of 9 quarries painted in a similar pigment with a yellow silver stain. And each quarry, again, like our examples, has the 2 lines painted across the top and the bottom. And they depict the Hennan Chick, like we have, the 4 plants with the leaves and the crescent sort of moon shape, like we've seen at the Fitzwilliam. But the V&A believe that the bird at the top right is a jackdaw, although I've always called it a magpie. And then we've got the flying duck in the centre. Bottom left, we've got the heron, and the right is the cock crowing. And just to show the similar nature of our panels, here we have the V&A example on the left and the Society's on the right. But just like the Fitzwilliam example that we saw previously, the V&A stained glass panel is also believed to have originated from Red House, from the nursery of Jenny and May, who were both born at Red House. And here we have a different example, but the same design, because the Hennan Chick also appeared in tiles. This tile was formerly set within a fireplace in a house in Cambridge, which also included tiles of another Morris and Company design, Leaves and Berries. And it's one of a set of 6 decorated with birds. Again, these tiles were painted by Webb in blue overglaze in a tin glazed white tile, and they were sold by the firm from 1862, so only shortly after the stained glass was designed. I'm now going to show the remaining quarries that were saved from Sandroyd, all of which were, well, unfortunately, there's no other way to put it, they were just wantonly smashed when the house was converted into flats. And this is a duplicate of Spencer Stanhope's motto that we saw from our panel just a few moments ago, because there were 3 of these in the whole collection. And then this one shows the coat of arms of Spencer Stanhope and his wife Elizabeth King, and it shows ermines and seamews. Seamews are birds like a variety of gull. And here we have a duck in flight. The William Morris Society was instrumental in averting the demolition of the house in 1962, but sadly they were unable to prevent that screen being destroyed in 1967. Fortunately, Ronald Briggs, the then secretary of the society, was able to rescue many fragments which he found actually in the mud outside the house. Briggs was a writer, a barrister, and a founder member of the society. These fragments, these broken pieces, have remained with the society ever since Briggs found them, until they were conserved. And here we have the heron. And although they were shattered into very small pieces, 6 quarries are almost complete and 4 reasonably so. And the further 16 are in various states of completion, making a total of 26 found out of the original 36 that we saw in that screen above the staircase. It was decided that the 6 most complete should be professionally conserved and leaded into a single panel for displaying at Kelmscott House, which we've seen now. Conservation of those 6 most complete quarries was carried out by the firm of Goddard and Gibbs Studios Limited. Goddard and Gibbs were a London-based manufacturers and restorers of stained glass windows, founded in 1868. This long-established company had an international reputation and continued to trade until they were acquired by Hardman and Company relatively recently in 2006, so very long established. But it's interesting to look at the history of Hardman, who took them over as well. They were an even longer established firm, being founded in 1838, and they began manufacturing stained glass in 1844, becoming one of the world's leading manufacturers of stained glass and ecclesiastical fittings. And just briefly to mention a little bit of their history, because it's quite interesting, because AWM Pugin was connected with Hardman and Company, first employing them to provide metal work for the decoration of St. Chad's Cathedral in Birmingham. And it was due to his persuasion, Pugin's persuasion, that the company entered the burgeoning industry of stained glass manufacture. In fact, the nephew of the company, who married Pugin's daughter Anne, claimed to be Pugin's only pupil. And that the firm continued to be very successful and made a major influence on church architecture and decoration, in particular the Gothic Revival period. I thought it would be interesting to find any records relating to the conservation of our stained glass, but sadly, it appears that the Goddard and Gibbs archive was lost when Hardman and Company took them over in 2006. And very sadly, just 2 years later in 2008, the business closed completely. So the remaining 22 quarries were cleaned, pieced together and mounted in an album with photographs of Webb's plans where the screen can be discerned penciled in. Additionally, there are photographs of the house and screen taken in situ, which we've seen, and they were taken by Surrey County Council in 1962 before the vandalism, which we've seen this morning. The sorting of these fragments cleaning and assembly for the album and construction of the display cabinet, which is now at Kelmscott House, was carried out by David Ranger in 1999. The conserved quarries were mounted in illuminated cabinets at Kelmscott House, and they've been on permanent display there ever since. David Ranger, who was the Society's librarian and a long-standing committee member, was responsible for this conservation project. He dedicated many years to the Society, organising numerous events and activities. So I hope you'd be pleased to know that his efforts in conserving and displaying this important glass is still greatly appreciated by our visitors over 50 years after the stained glass was smashed. And I'm just showing you the remainder of the stained glass. These are some of the most incomplete examples that we have in the collection. And I think that's the last one. That's the last one that's the most incomplete, sadly. But just going back to the most complete examples, one of the most popular of the designs is the Hennan Chick. And in the early days of the Society, in their shop, they used to sell these Hennan Chick greetings cards, and they were lovingly hand printed on Morris's Albion printing press, which is at Kelmscott House. Those of you that have visited, I imagine, might have seen it, and some of you might have been lucky enough to see it being demonstrated as well. And so this is, I think, a lovely coloured example of a greetings card made on Morris's press. And I'd like to end the talk by demonstrating that it's visitors of all ages who both appreciate and are learning from these beautiful early examples by showing this recent ceramic tile that was actually painted by one of our primary school pupils on a school visit to Kelmscott House. I think it's a charming painting, and it was directly inspired by the Hennan Chick, as we can see on the bottom right. Inspired over 150 years after it was created, which I think is a nice sort of more uplifting end to our story. So I hope people have enjoyed that. Oh, and I've just realised, I've just seen that Katie, David Ranger's daughter, is listening this morning. So a very warm welcome to you. And I wanted to actually dedicate this talk to your father. I have very fond memories of working with him at Kelmscott House, and we're incredibly proud of everything he did for the Society. So thank you, Katie, for being here and listening this morning. If it wasn't for your father, David Ranger, we wouldn't have the stained glass displayed as it is now, and have brought countless joy to all the visitors to Kelmscott House. So thank you for joining us. And if anybody has any questions at all, I'd be very happy to answer them. And hopefully when the Society's back open again, hopefully people can come and actually visit, because the stained glass is actually, as I mentioned, on permanent display. When you enter the Society, in the basement, the lower library, you can actually see that on display. Somebody's actually asked us, when I mentioned that the stained glass panels were smashed and found in the mud outside the house, they've asked if it was a deliberate act by the workers while they were being converted, when the house was being converted into flats. And that's what I think it was. From everything that I've read, from David Ranger's notes, from Ronald Briggs' sort of archival letters, I believe that the builders that came in, to actually make the conversion into flats, maybe just didn't appreciate that this was very early Webb and Morris glass, so they may not have been aware of the history of the glass. But regardless, it's just a great shame that this ever happened. I think in the 1960s, Victorian architecture and designs perhaps weren't so appreciated as they are now. And I think it's perhaps a combination of those things. They just didn't, you know, think of the historic interior. They were there to do a job. And it's just incredibly sad that nobody was around to save this. And I think when the society, the officers of the society found out what had happened, they were immediately on the scene, but unfortunately too late to save the glass from being broken in this way. I mean, it was just, they could have so easily, you know, removed the whole screen, I would have thought, and it's just heartbreaking to see it in this state. And just looking at the other questions. Somebody's asked why couldn't the society save the windows? I think from what I've heard from people that were around at the time was that they were basically arrived too late. They were doing their very best. They were instrumental in saving the house and getting it listed in the 60s. But when the builders came in and the people that were converting Sandroyd into self-contained flats, I imagine it just wasn't known what was going to happen to the interior. So I suppose nobody could be there all the time to monitor the builders and find out what was actually going on. But it is sort of hearsay. Some other people might know more about what happened at the time, but it is tragic. Or somebody said it'd be lovely. Oh, hello, Angela. Lovely if the cards could be done again. I think that I don't see a reason why not, because the Albion printing press that was Morris's printing press that we have at the society is fully working. It's recently been renovated, and when we have fully trained professionals to actually use it, it's probably a good question to ask about possibly reissuing the tile, because we do still have the original wood blocks that were created, or sorry, not original from Morris, I mean original from when the card was created in the 1970s when it was being printed. So there's probably no reason why not. We could actually reissue it. I think it's just so charming. It'd be lovely to have it for sale again. Chris has asked about where the photographs of the interiors are archived. Surrey County Council took those photographs in the early 60s, 62. So they have their original photographs in their archive, but the ones that I actually showed you that were obviously not so good quality, because I photographed them from our copies. So if people are interested, the society has everything that I showed this morning. They're all copies of the society's photographs. There are duplicates from Surrey County Council, so they're in our collection at Kelmscott House. Or somebody said they bought a Hennan Chick tile from Kelmscott Manor. And see if there's any other questions. Oh, somebody was asking what's written on in 1861. So the tile bottom left, 1861. I think you may have missed the beginning of the talk. It's the motto for Rodham Spencer Stanhope. So that RSS is actually his initials, his name, Rodham Spencer Stanhope, who commissioned Webb to build Red House. And then the rest of it, I better get my my correct. I'm just going to try and tell you again. It's God on my right. Let me just find my notes, because I've got here we go. So the rest of it is for God and King, Adeo au rege, and Dieu defend le droit, God defend the right. So that's what it says on that bottom left. And I think that's all our questions this morning. And we've had some really lovely thank yous. I really can't thank you enough for all the lovely messages that people have said. Somebody said they've learned a lot since we started doing these talks. So a huge thank you for your support for being here this morning. And we are going to continue because we realise not everybody can come to London to listen to lectures. So these online talks are brilliant for a lot of people. And what we're going to do for next month's talk is we're going to look at the remarkable residence of Kelmscott House and a little bit of the history of the house. And that's to link in with Open House Weekend. I think London has Open House Weekend and others around the country have their Heritage Open Days. So we're linking in with that by talking about Kelmscott House. So I'll be mentioning some of the lesser known residents along with Morris himself and some beautiful interior photographs of the house that hopefully you won't have seen, and telling you some about some of the fascinating people that lived there, going from the very beginning to more recent times. So I really hope you can join us in September for our History of Kelmscott House talk. And thank you again for joining us. And I hope everybody has a lovely rest of their day. And I look forward to seeing people next month.